Okay, we're live. Lindsay, do you want to? Do you have a plan? Do you have a plan in mind?
So what I was thinking, and we can see what if there's any other items on the list today. But I was hoping to take some time to chat a bit about like the community aspect of things, keeping track of documents for like process and how do we work, how do we operate, how are decisions made, and also like what is sort of our expectation of other people who want to actually come in and contribute, and so like how do you do that? So ideally, you know, like starting an issue, having a conversation first, and then holding up to do a pull request, and then what actually is our pull request process, those kinds of things. I don't think we need to get too fine-grained, but I think it's important to like start laying some of that out so that expectations are clear. Yeah, so with that in mind, are there any other items or urgent things people want to go over today? We can make sure we have time for that too.
Whoa.
Are you getting feedback from my end?
Yeah, I can hear myself. But it's okay. I'll be quiet.
Because if that's the case, we can try to maybe just, you don't want to turn down the volume just a touch.
Down.
Yeah, just a little bit. We'll see. It should figure it out, but sometimes it takes a minute. Dom, can you try saying something?
Yeah, I was just going to say, yeah, that's good. I was going to say that I'm slacking off on the SimPEG tree match for Joe, but I didn't forget you. It's gonna happen at some point.
Cool. Do you need Joe or Sagi? Any?
Nothing really particular. I'm working on like making an app for linear inversion. So I don't know, I could show that, but I think there's probably something we need to make something like that just for make it easier to use our SimPEG inversion codes. But other than that, I don't have any other things.
Okay. Yeah, but it'd be nice to see what you're up to there. And
yeah, so Sagi, is there any changes since, because you've been working on deployments, right, on installers for the Wendy code? I forget when it was last week. Did you change anything from the last time, or?
Not really. I think what I changed it was, yeah, okay. So I think I learned how to auto-deploy stuff in PyPy, so that's what I changed it. I think other than that, I haven't changed it that much. I added a few functionality for like a 1D code that you can invert for per million, ppm, for frequency domain data. I think other than that, I didn't change anything, I guess.
Okay, that's good. I guess a little background is that Sagi and I are trying to give little chunks of codes to our sponsors, and the biggest hurdle is the installation. So Sagi's been working hard at just packaging everything into sort of small installers. Yeah, so you can like download the mini conda and then just install exactly what you need within SimPEG just to execute one task. So I think it's not the best way to do it because obviously we're kind of limiting our the users, but it's kind of like for an end use of SimPEG for a specific task. Anyway, that's
okay. Dom and Sagi, have you looked into? I think in Python it's called freezing. I know of a module called CX_freeze that essentially compiles an executable out of code.
Freezing?
Yeah, it's called freezing. I think it's, let me look it up quickly. I think it's CX_freeze. So you kind of just, I used it a couple of years ago and I found it very useful to just, I was manipulating a CSV file.
What are the biggest issues to installation that they're facing?
It's just the number of steps. Like most end users, we don't want to have to go through the hurdle of like typing pip install 5 times and then fixing the C++ and all that stuff. So ideally, if we can just have like one click button and then they're set up so that they can run things, it's just to speed things up, make it easier for people that are not programmers. That's the idea.
And Dom, the other thing that Soggy mentioned to me is that firewalls are a bit of an issue, and like people trying to conda install stuff seem to be a problem.
Yeah, yep, that's right. Some companies, they can't install anything if it's downloaded from the internet, so it needs to be, given on a USB stick or whatever. Those are really end users, So.
What about conda recipes? Because like that is something that we actually should have for SimPEG and for discretize in particular. We should have that anyways, and that might also help ease installation if you can get the mini conda. I don't know how that all interoperates, but I think that's probably also worth looking into because it should be there anyways.
Yeah.
SimPEG itself is still just pure Python code, correct? There's nothing in it that needs to be compiled for anything. It's just all of its dependencies have issues.
Yeah.
Right.
So discretize is the challenge there. That's the one we really need a conda recipe for.
I do feel like if we do get the deployments to PyPy working correctly with all the wheel files and the pre-built stuff, it would probably simplify a lot of that.
Right. Well, I think so Dom and I made a bash file, so you can basically just install everything. And that kind of works as long as that discretized package works. So yeah, we're gonna try with some sponsor's machine, and if that works, I think that's okay. So we can share that later.
I've also run into a few things with my own. I've deployed a few Fortran dependent libraries that were dependent on libg Fortran, like for conda or for Python installations. I've had to patch in the dynamic libraries into the wheel so it would load them in instead of being dependent on mine. So I've also had that issue. But there's tools. That's mostly a big issue on Unix systems, so Linux and OS X. But there's tools to patch them in very easily, especially if you look at PyPy's
that would be really
distribution.
Nice. Huh.
Those will patch in DLL files that are dependent. In Windows, you kind of just, it's a lot weirder. You kind of just have to include it somewhere.
I see. Oh.
But I don't think there were that many issues with discretize being dependent on things like that.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, keep us posted, and if there's questions or walls that come up, we can just post stuff on Slack, and we'll see if the collective can come up with some ideas to help out there. Cool. Okay. Did you guys have items too? We didn't get to.
I do have a few things, but not. Code's really messy, and I don't have really much to show. But well, I'm working on loading in those binary files for the MT data.
Okay. Cool.
So I'll write a loader for that, and then I'm kind of got sidetracked, and I'm trying to write like an optimization fitting to vocal curves.
Oh.
And I was gonna pose to you guys to see what my math is only so high, and maybe what kind of tools I could use to maybe improve it. Right now, I just have it like a wide spread of values, see which one is good, and then just keep narrowing down. Maybe there's a better way.
Soggy.
Soggy, you're always the man for my question.
So John, so are you what kind of optimization are you using? Are you using a gradient based, or are you using like a kind of like a global algorithm like a simplex, or what's?
See, I'm a little bit like, this is new area to me, but essentially what I'm doing, it's like more like a lookup. So I just give it a wide range of values, and then it goes in and tries to find the best one, and then it narrows down from there. It just keeps iterating and then narrowing down. But I don't know. Oh, sorry.
Well, like there's a multiple way. So that's like a kind of like a global search types of algorithm, right? Like you put a range and then try a bunch of things and then find the minimal. Or we could do a simple like a kind of like a, I don't know, gradient-based algorithm if you have a sensitivity. So there are multiple ways.
Yeah, I'd love to go into the sensitivity route there. That would be cool. Something new. I'd love to learn it. So
yeah, I got some code, not for CoCo, but for stretch exponential. But I think we can build one if you need that functionality.
Oh, cool. Yeah, that would be something interesting. I did just push it to my branch just recently, but yeah, maybe I'll just tag you in something Slack about it, and we'll see what we can work out.
Right. So actually, like, it's nicely aligned with what I was working on, because what I'm working on now, like, rather than assuming a step-off function.
Okay.
Because you're assuming a step-off function, but if you have a multiple, like a waveform, let's say repetitive waveform, let's say you got a 3 pulse or 5 pulse, and then after that you stack it, right?
Yeah.
So you can actually put that process in that kind of formalling code, for instance, because it depends upon like how small your tau or how big your tau. Sometimes if you have a really strong, like a slowly decaying function, assuming a step off doesn't really make sense.
Oh, okay.
So I was working on that, kind of implementing that types of stuff. But so we could do that if you want.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think we could chat later, but I think there are that types of stuff.
Right on. Oh, that's good. Good answer. Yeah, I wasn't expecting to get such a good response right away. All right.
Just to mention it now, too, like I had a colleague back in Montreal, like, and his PhD is on GitHub too, and it was about a Markov chain for fitting spectral IP. So it's in the frequency domain.
Oh, okay.
But it's also there. I can send you the GitHub repository if you want.
That's perfect. Cool. Thanks.
Actually, and on a similar note, Sagi and I had a chat with Burke Minsley and Leon, who are at the USGS.
Oh,
and so they have written, it's called GeoSci.xyz.
Oh. Okay.
And it's an MCMC engine for airborne EM. And so they wanted to hook up, or they want to hook up SimPEG EM1D to it. So they've got their own code that they've been using right now, but it assumes a dipole source. And they're looking at doing some ground-based inversions where the loop is on the ground and a dipole source just isn't sufficient, but we can handle loop sources. So we'll keep you posted on progress there. Leon's giving a talk this week at SciPy. So when those links are posted, I'll send that around on Slack. That'd be nice for everyone to see.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sagi, go ahead.
No, I think I just said yeah.
Okay.
Nothing else.
Fair enough. Cool. Okay, well, let's maybe spend a little bit of time. I'll show you guys some of what I've sketched out in this community repository. And we can chat about it, give it some thought. I don't think there's any decisions that need to be made today. I'm hoping that this is much more an exploratory chat and just like bring some things to light about, what kind of things do we want to have documented as a community? What sorts of resources do we need to develop to help you guys, to help everybody onboard people more easily, and those kinds of things. So I'm just going to pull that up and then I will share my screen. So the URL, it's cool. Can you guys see that?
Yep.
Okay. So it's github.com/simpeg/community. And so if you look in there right now, there's hardly anything there. And that's because I've started stuff mostly as pull requests and issues, because I want it to be something that you can go in and comment on. And like this is totally a work in progress, and I've mostly scraped things together by looking at the Jupyter organization, as well as looking at some of the work that Leo has done with Fadiando, and where he's pulled community guidelines and things like that from. Yeah, so if you currently go here, that's the only thing you're going to see. And in fact, I've got a pull request to actually change the license, because these are like Word documents. And initially I put a MIT license, but that doesn't actually make sense for this. I think that a Creative Commons license would be more suitable. And that's in line with what Jupyter does. So I'll actually quickly show you this guy. So I linked here the Jupyter governance docs. And so there's some really cool things in there. So their overall README, I think, is, or the overall governance doc is worth taking a look at. There's a lot of stuff that they've formalized a lot more than I think we need to at this stage, but it's good to have something to look to and to think about. Like right now, there's a lot of process around, okay, thanks, Joe. We'll catch up with you later. There's a lot of process around like deciding who's on the steering council, what the steering council does, how does somebody actually get onto the steering council. So I think that down the road, this is a good idea of something to have. I think that we do want to have a set of people who are responsible for the direction of SimPEG and for making decisions about what's to be included, what's not, and just like laying that out and being, I guess, the stewards in a sense of the vision, and like making sure that that gets out and that that's communicated and that we're on the same page with that as well. So I think that's something to think about, is like, do we want a steering council? What does that look like? What are your responsibilities on that? And then how does somebody get onto there? So those are some things to think about. Feel free to interrupt if you guys have ideas or things like that that come up. So I'll flip back to, this is what's in the SimPEG community. So I think there's two things that are really worth looking at right now, is this pull request, the initial docs, and then there's an issue here as well on governance. So let's start with the docs, and I'll show you a couple things that we put in there for now. Actually, what I'll do, I'm going to change the branch just so we get the nicely formatted markdown. You can look at all the files changed here, but the other thing that we can do is just switch the branch. So here, there's a few docs that I've put in. So there's a license, the README, which is this guy. One document on the process for creating new repositories in SimPEG and how do we want to actually do that. There's one on project licenses within SimPEG. And then here, the repo docs, these are meant to be documents that eventually, if you want to create a new repository within SimPEG, you could scrape these documents because they are sort of somewhat standard. So that being a code of conduct and a contributing. So the code of conduct, the initial draft that I took is, it's from the contributor covenant. So this is a set of resources that a group of people has put out. I don't actually know too much about them, but they've gone through and scoped out a decent code of conduct. And so a lot of groups are adopting this and then perhaps tailoring it to what they like. But I thought that this was potentially a good place to start. So the code of conduct basically just being, it's a thing that we can point people to if we see sort of actions that don't align with how we want people to interact in this group. You know, we haven't had issues so far, but as things expand and you get people who, you know, we're not in direct contact with, there's always that risk. And so it's nice to actually have something concrete that you can point people to and say like, hey, this behavior does not align with our code of conduct. And that sort of takes your personal feelings out of the situation as well. Is like, here's a document that the community's agreed upon that like we are going to ask you to follow, and if not, then go find somewhere else. So I think those kinds of things down the road are important. Yeah, so take a look through this. Do you guys have any questions or thoughts on like the idea of a code of conduct, or?
Like you said, it's definitely something that needs to be implemented before it gets too big.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's one of those things you want in place before something goes wrong.
Exactly. Yeah.
So,
it's about time before it starts picking up.
Yeah. No, I think it looks really good, and I agree that it's better to do it now before it actually something comes up. I'll look through it. The only thing that I would say as well, there might be worthwhile thinking about having something about how, I guess, industry kind of can approach and should approach, or I don't know. I'm just kind of thinking, just in terms of like, at least in my experience, just talking with people, the whole open source is very. I mean, it's not necessarily a new idea, but it's hard to reconcile from a business perspective. So maybe even just having resources kind of for people to go and like, oh, okay, that's kind of how it's supposed to work, or this is how I contribute.
I kind of ran into something like that with my boss there because I'm pushing to get that data so that we can use it. And a lot of his questions are always like, oh, so it's an open source. Like, so does this mean if we hand over the data, everybody can have it kind of thing? And trying to explain to him, like, you know, the code is open source, but we can keep stuff like this.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Yeah.
That relates kind of thing is just that open source. All of a sudden people, like industry, I guess, would be like that because they're so protective of their stuff.
Yeah.
But they want to, you know, experiment here. Maybe something that claims.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that comes with time. I mean, that's my experience too. Like just getting permission, people just get lost, like not knowing. So, and I mean, and people also want to contribute. Like companies want to give back, but they just literally don't know how. And then, if you don't know how, and you have to go and convince your boss of how to do it, you just, I mean, if you don't know how, you can't. So having some sort of a platform or something to be able to point to would be super helpful.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And there's two things that sort of made me think of. This is overly formal for SimPEG, but it could be a helpful guide. So within the Jupyter governance docs, they've got institutional partners and funding. And so just like, what is an institutional partner? What does that look like? So a lot of this language is perhaps a little more formal because they're looking at for-profit, nonprofit, but a lot of this is actually entirely appropriate as well.
Yeah.
And I think that this is actually a good point, is that like, institutions are eligible simply by having people who actively contribute. Like you don't have to be contributing dollars by contributing some of the time. Like that is valued as a contribution.
That's cool.
And one, I really like how Interact, so Interact is built on the Jupyter protocol, and in a lot of ways is a simpler form of the notebook. And Kyle Kelly at Netflix has championed a lot of this. And so one of the things that they have just on their README, which I think is kind of cool, is they've got sponsors and then they've got made possible by. And so having just like a list of, and he invites you as well to actually, like, if your employer allows you to work on this during work hours, please add yourself to the list. So I think that that's a really cool way to actually demonstrate like a healthy open source industry relationship. Yeah, so we could totally do something like that.
That's cool.
It's a good way to look bigger than we are.
Yeah. Yeah, it's nice that they've developed all the resources and give us ideas. Okay, cool. So that's the code of conduct. The other thing that's in here is the contributing guide. And this is really well done. I think John Lehman is responsible for a lot of this, as is the MetPy crew. So this is kind of cool. Is how do you actually get involved? And there's a few resources on getting started within GitHub, how to write a good issue, how to write a good pull request, those kinds of things. I like the Zen of scientific software maintenance. If you guys haven't seen this, it's quite nice. And so, yeah, I think that it's just some good ideas and some nice things to point to.
I think you might have posted or showed me this or something, because I remember when I started reading this, I'm like, oh, I better start fixing up my code a bit.
Yeah, I think it's like just some good guidelines, and it's not anything we're holding people to, but I thought it was a nice resource to point to. So this whole thing was scraped from MetPy. So ground rules, the code of conduct, and then there's a few ways for things that people can do. So make an issue, tackle an issue, contribute code that you've got, those kinds of things. How to get in touch. And so right now we've got the Slack chat room and the mailing list. Some tips on reporting a bug. And this will become more and more important, especially as we're getting users who are having trouble installing stuff. It's really important that before diving into all the details, we actually just get the picture of what version of the code are they using, what operating system, are you installing with Anaconda, yes or no, before you invest a whole bunch of time in trying to debug what's going on. Some general guidelines on pull requests. So I think that this is important, and in a lot of ways, I think we should start trying to do this a little bit more. And so before you actually start coding, write up just a simple issue describing what you're about to do. That just brings everybody on board. And also, if there's something related that somebody's already done on a personal branch or something like that, it gives us a chance to sort of try and consolidate those things. Trying to keep pull requests small. That we're sort of okay at sometimes. I'm certainly guilty of very large out of scope pull requests. Yeah, descriptive messages, those kinds of things. Let's see. Yeah, and then some good tips on code reviews, what we're looking for. And so, yeah, things like, trying to follow decent style guides and things like that. And we, of course, still have progress to make there. I do think that we should shortly try and get tests like Flake8 and Pylint running. So those would actually, they lint the code and make sure that new code that's contributed actually follows like Flake8 and all that sort of stuff. But that won't happen right away. This I also thought was really nice. We don't currently do this, but I think that we should. And so have a Conda environment for developers. So I think that, for first-time contributors and things like that, if they can actually just build a Conda environment that works for contributing to SimPEG, that would be fantastic. And that's not a hard thing to do. So
what does that mean, Lindsay?
So do you know remember how I showed in this big research, this Conda environment? And so this includes a list of channels that we're going to install stuff through, and then all of the dependencies. And then all you do is you say source activate emsil environment. So that's the name of this one. And then that puts you in a Conda environment that has all of these guys installed. And so what's nice about that is you don't have to worry about like pip installing, those kinds of things. If like this just takes care of all of that all at once. Does that make sense, Dom?
Yeah, it makes sense. Aren't we starting to like duplicate the installations every time though? If we have an environment for, I don't know how it works, so.
It saves the environment, so you don't have to duplicate everything. And this isn't necessarily something like, because SimPEG is a workhorse for what you do. You don't necessarily strictly have to use this. But I think that like I can see value in onboarding others. Like for me personally, I'll still probably just use my like core environment as my SimPEG development environment because it is like what I do every day. But for others, like with working with Burke and Leon, I could see, for example, cases where they have different dependencies and like want to keep those things somewhat separate.
So it's mostly a versioning thing?
Yeah, it's versioning and environment management, really.
Okay.
So like ideally it would be nice if we could distribute something like this for installing SimPEG down the road. But I think that's a different conversation.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's sort of the gist of the contributing guide. Are there any other questions on that?
I'm just asking like the question of like how do you choose like what should go, for example, like in a new repository with the community and guidelines, or when you create a wiki page on the GitHub, because we had something like that too for EM GeoSci when we had like getting started and contribution and attribution for EM GeoSci. So just what difference you made between, because I mean we don't use that much the wiki page. I agree.
Yeah, I think that these docs are versioned better and they're easy to copy, whereas a wiki is not as well versioned, and it's not easy to just like scrape a document from there, because we want to actually just be able to like copy paste this document in all of the repos basically and adapt what's needed. So I think. Yeah, I don't actually like see all that many projects using the wikis.
Yeah, exactly. So I was just wondering.
Yeah.
Yeah. Might just kind of phase that out slowly.
I don't think we've used it.
Yeah.
So
Seems more
I
just
don't
like a
think there's
place you
phasing
splatter
out.
things on. It's not like a formal or like you said, there's no way to version it really unless you physically type it in.
Yeah. And because with stuff like this, if we're going to change anything in the like community docs, we should absolutely have a discussion and a pull request review in that before changing. Okay, so those are just the two docs that I have right now in the community docs. There's other things, like give it some thought if there's other things that you think we should have in all of the SimPEG repos. Certainly a license, and I've put that here right now. So the projects we should copyright to the SimPEG developers. This is again something that follows how Jupyter's done things. They use a slightly different license. So it might be worth us doing just a little bit more digging to make sure MIT is actually the license that we want. I think both SimPEG and Discretize are pretty tied to that. It's very hard to change at this point. But in the future, if we want to be using like the BDS or BSD, I don't know enough about the distinction. There's something about patents in there. So that's worth looking at. And then here, I liked this addition that Jupyter had made as well, is about SimPEG developers. Who are they? And so right now I have that listed as the group of people listed under the SimPEG GitHub organization. which I think is a reasonable catch-all. Yeah, so then here, new repository process. And so this is following, again, the Jupyter organization. They have a slightly more complex process because they also like create new organizations on GitHub because they've got so much to manage. They actually have multiple organizations and multiple repos within those organizations. I think we can keep SimPEG a little more contained as one organization. And so these are just some ideas about how do we want to put things in place for creating new repositories or potentially bringing in other projects. So if somebody's developed an interesting extension to SimPEG, how do we actually create a space for them to bring that in if they're interested in doing so? So yeah, these follow the Jupyter criteria. I've trimmed things down a little bit because, again, not everything was strictly applicable to us. But I think that like some of these criteria are fairly safe to say. Like having an active developer community that offers some sustainability model. We certainly don't want people just dumping code and then expecting us to maintain it. That's not okay. And having an active user community helps that. I don't think it's strictly necessary that an active user community there right away. There should at least be potential for it though. Yeah, reasonably written code that follows best practices, those kinds of things. And then I think like a lot of the decisions, the Jupyter team did a really good job of using their mailing list to communicate decisions or new things and stuff like that. And so I think that this type of statement is nice, is that if there is something that's in scope and is going to be created, it's the creator's job to actually email the mailing list and like give some description of what's going on and that kind of thing. So I think we should try and use the mailing list a bit more to keep people up to date on what's going on. Because I believe that the mailing list collection of people is larger than the like newsletter that's sent out for just the meetings and stuff. Cool. Yeah, that's sort of. Oh yeah, and then the last thing is the issue on governance and starting to get some ideas on how do we want to sketch out a governance document. Do we want a steering council? Who's on the steering council? What are their responsibilities? Do we want to nominate a BDFL? I liked the Jupyter definition. So have a look at their docs and see what you think is fitting, and we'll go from there.
Well, it sounds like you're really starting working hard on the nonprofit organization that we need to create. It's kind of all the same idea, right? To have a board and to have a constitution and all that, mission statement.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that those things are one and the same.
Because we'll need to make it happen. I think, like on my point of view, we'll need to make it happen before the end of the year.
There's also a question of if we want to approach NumFocus and go that way. I think either of these things can work.
What's their mandate? What's NumFocus mandate?
Well, NumFocus is basically like a nonprofit umbrella for open source projects. So Jupyter, for example, is fiscally sponsored by NumFocus. So NumFocus is legal home for Jupyter. What's sort of nice about that is like they've already gone through all of the legal stuff to set up a nonprofit, and in this case, it actually is set up as a charity, so that gives better tax benefits. And that's a lot of paperwork to do in the US. In Canada, it might be a different story.
Yeah, it costs nothing in Canada. It's like I looked it up. It's like $300, and then we have a nonprofit. So I don't think it's that big of a deal. The advantage if it's in Canada is that well, we can issue tax credits for the CRA in Canada, right? It's not going to be a US entity.
Right. But that's a nonprofit. To actually get charity status is a different.
Yeah, it's a foundation. I'm sorry. Yeah, you need to be a foundation.
Yeah.
It's not that different. Anyway, we can talk about it later. But
yeah, but absolutely, these are things that like we should be thinking about. And if you want to start dumping ideas into, let's actually start a different issue on that.
Yeah.
Go for it, and we can just start brainstorming and catching things. I think that would be good to do at this phase. Is let's just like branch out and give it some thought. Yeah. Where's
the mailing list, Lindsay?
So that is the Google forum. So this groups.google.com/forum/SimPEG.
Yeah, I'm there.
Yeah, so this is the mailing list. Anything that goes, like anything that's posted here, goes to the entire mailing list.
But can we see who's on the mailing list?
I can.
You can, yeah. That's okay.
Yeah, so there's quite a few.
Yeah, how many? Curiosity.
I don't actually. You know what? I will look that up and I'll post it in the Slack channel afterwards.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah, because I don't know offhand. Yeah, but also take a look at like the Jupyter project mailing list just to get some ideas of how they're using it. And if you're not on it, like I sign up so you can. You can tailor how many emails you get and things like that. So I get a condensed email every 3 days or something like that about what's going on. So yeah, but they go through and they're, M was just invited to join the steering council. And so that is then announced to the mailing list. So changes in governance and all of that kind of stuff goes out, as well as new ideas and questions. Cool. Okay. Any other things you guys want to go over right now for this? No? Okay.
I don't. Thank you for starting this. That's great.
Yeah, that was the only comment I was going to make. Thank you very much.
Appreciate your work.
Yeah, it's a lot of work.
Well, there's lots of good resources out there. Yeah, so feel free to comment on stuff, and we can comment on the issues and on the pull requests in here. If there's stuff that you think should be changed, feel free to make a comment and let's chat about it, and we can start sort of having this be like a regular part of the SimPEG meeting conversations.
Lindsay, to become a non-focused project, are there any requirements?
Yeah, I mean, we have to apply to them. We have to have a big enough user base that they'd be interested. We originally talked to them 2 years ago at SciPy, and we weren't quite there. I think we are now, actually.
Okay.
Or at least have promise enough that they would take a much more serious interest in us. Yeah, so it's something to think about.
Okay.
Well, with that, Sagi, do you want to take the reins and show us your inversion?
Yeah, just quickly, I guess.
The rapid fire tour.
Can you guys see it?
Yeah.
Can you see the notebooks?
Yeah.
Right. So yes, Doug has a course in 2 weeks. So in University of Houston, and that's for a week course. And for one day, we want to give a linear inverse theory. So yeah, I was revisiting the linear inverse problem. So that's the kernel. So this is the general data. You got some sort of like a Green's function G and the model. So you can build in that way. So you got like a decaying, exponential is a decaying function, and then oscillating as well. So it's kind of like you can imitate some like a EM measurements as well. So it's decaying and oscillating. So you can change, so N is the number of data, M is the number of model. So you can change the number of data, number of model. So you're seeing the sensitivity matrix in like a row direction. So you can change the P. So it's a decaying rate. So if you, and also you can change the oscillation. Something like that. Then I think it's more like so here we're building a forward kernel. Then the second step is a model. So you can generate this types of model. So you can change the background. Something like that. Or you can change the amplitude of M1 and M2. Or you can change the here, now you can generate the data, or you can see the kernel together. So got a kernel, doing a dot product with the model generates the data. Now you can add the noise. So if say 10%, not that much. So let's put floor to 2. Yeah, so I think here you can generate the noise and the model. So that's a main part. So this is an inversion module. So I'm like not sure. I think this is probably what like it's a basic functionality. You need to put a maximum iteration, initial model, reference model, percentage, and floor for the uncertainty. And RMS, this is the chi factor basically. So it's a target misfit. And then we're using a beta cooling scheme. So we need to set the beta knot ratio, cooling factor, cooling rate, alpha S, alpha X, then run. Then you can get that types of stuff. So you can get a model, data. So now you can change, or you can play with, okay, if I put 0 alpha S or 0 alpha X, then you can change that. So you can now you can put the misfit curve or thickness. So here I think I'm just running one iteration, so I think it doesn't show you anything. But let's say I'm starting from beta knot ratio 100, and then cooling rate 2, RMS 0.1. Then you can see the thickness curve and misfit, something like that. So I think that's the gist of the app. And I think it's probably nice to have something like that for other inversion code, so user can easily set the parameters and basically run the inversion. Hello?
Yeah, I can hear you. So that's good, man. That's great. So you basically repackage the linear example, right?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think this is for educational purposes, but I think for other codes, it's probably nice to have like this types of kind of F form. At least you can generate all the input parameters of inversion and run.
Are you, because I started trying this to just stop all the display, you know, the log. because every time you run it, it kind of fills up. You can fill up your screen, and it's annoying for the user. Yeah. Do you know a quick way to do it?
Actually, I don't know. So that's actually that's the question that I have. So I think so. I just put a switch on and off button.
Yeah.
So I'm running it. Then you switch off. Then I'm not running it. So I'm in sort of like a coring mode. So you can see the misfit thickness curve.
That's a good idea. Yeah, that's a good idea.
So that's. But I think in usual cases, I think it's hard to do this because like your inversion will take longer. So I was more thinking about like, okay, you got an app to generate those parameters, and then you can basically like generate some sort of script and run the inversion and read it again.
Or in your case, probably a good idea to split the visualization in two, so you can go back in the models, or you can save all your models and like travel on the misfit curve. That would be pretty neat.
Right. So I think here I just generated it as a class, so you can save some variables. So if you click, like if you kind of deactivate run, then you can query your inversion results.
Yeah, because so yeah, I think like the MT one that we did, it's nice to walk along the Tikhonov curve. Is there maybe a way that, like, because you're stopping it when you hit the target misfit?
So I think what you could do is so here I'm setting RMS to 0.01, for instance, then increase the iteration to 30, run it.
Yeah, I guess the only thing I was thinking there is it's nice to show where your true target misfit actually is with respect to the model then that you're looking at. So what's potentially like just a bit confusing for people when you look at this, like if you switch to your Tikhonov curve, where your star isn't actually, oh, is your star actually at a chi factor of 1?
Yep.
Okay, fair enough, that works.
So you can see that in the misfit. So I think that's where the star, and the Tikhonov is that's where the star.
Okay, yeah. Okay, then yeah, the only extra thing that I think would be like really valuable is actually then like an app that could even be after this that lets you just basically do exactly what we did in the MT one, where you plot where you are along the Tikhonov curve in conjunction with the model that you're looking at.
Right.
Or this, but if you also just add the Tikhonov curve, actually.
Just here. I see. Yeah, so I think that's potential. So here we can add the slider bar. We can change the iteration and plot the different model and the predicted data with the Tikhonov curve.
Yeah, I think that would be extremely valuable.
I see. Okay. Yeah, that sounds good to me.
That's super cool. And then Dom, for your question about suppressing output, there isn't actually, we haven't built that in easily, but we certainly could. Because for stuff like this, I can see why that would be valuable.
Yeah, and you know, like when we're gonna start launching things on clusters and stuff, you don't want to have log files that are a million lines long.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so I mean, there is a native Python module called logging that is very effective in logging things, and you can set the priority of the logging and how you want to log it and where you want to take it. I've made some effort on it for my stuff. For the MT, one of the MT branches that I'm hoping will eventually get into the master. Don't think it's in master yet, but that would be a very good way to go, because it allows you to set kind of with a user input how you want and where you want it to be logged.
And it's a module. It's a Python library.
Yeah, it's a standard Python library for logging.
Oh, okay.
And you just decorate your code with it when you want the output.
Yeah, you essentially just initiate a logger. The way I did it, I for a project, you just initiate the logger with essentially the project name, and then so for example, if I think I said something like SimPEG forward was my base logger name, and then in every function, so for example, I mean, just calculate data or project data, it would be SimPEG forward dot calculate data or something like that, and it'll kind of keep track of it for you. You can set whether you want the date, you can format the string. It's a very powerful library for logging, and again, there are essentially 5 default levels: debugging, warnings, error, info, and critical. And it also plays relatively well with native exceptions. So you can have them kind of, so if you have a warning log, it can be kind of logged by raising an error and vice versa. Though I did not go that far, but you are able to do stuff like that.
Right.
One other thing with apps, I think actually once properties is injected everywhere in there too, having like an app builder actually won't be that challenging of a thing to do, because it is pretty clear when you're setting up the linear problem, like what the parameters are and what reasonable ranges are.
Right.
So that's something we can look forward to and sort of use these types of notebooks to give us a sketch of what that should look like.
Right. It'll be nice to have some sort of base class for like a building an app, because I think that's what I'm basically doing. Because so this is a linear inversion app that I had to build. So I think there are some generic things.
Yeah.
And if you can provide some base class for like an app, I think that'll be nice.
Well, I'm seeing it, Sagi, more so as actually like we should actually be able to build an app from a forward simulation object or from an inversion object. Do you see what I'm saying? So it's like, because all of the parameters here that you've set, we actually know that your J star, JN, P, Q, all of those things are already described by the forward simulation, right?
That's true.
So the forward simulation should know how to provide you the parameters to create an app of itself.
Yes. Right. So I think this is kind of weird format because I'm setting the G here, but so I think this is not a good format. But for a general case, if you have a problem and like a forward simulation inversion, we can basically kind of inherit that. I think you're right.
Yeah, and so like this is totally a great step forward in terms of helping sketch out what that should look like. That was my other comment.
Right. Okay. Cool. I think that's it on my end.
Okay.
All right, so we're about an hour in. You guys, anything else you would like to say? UBC? Joe? All good? Everybody's quiet? All right.
So Joe, I got a question. What are the status of Octree code now?
I think they're good. Everything is built and everything passes. I've talked with Mitch about it. It seems like his stuff's working well on it.
Right. Well, and then you said you have shown us that the 2D quadtree use of DC, right? And then is that have you figured out how to build a mesh and stuff, just for given electrodes and stuff?
Yeah, basically I just, at that point, I can share the notebook on how I did it, but it was just discretize or just interpolate topography and then kind of extend downwards from there.
That'll be really nice, because that's only one missing piece to actually use the Octree mesh and DC.
Yeah, it would be good to have just a set of base functions to use to create the Octree meshes. extend from topography or.
Right, right. But yeah, can you share with us? That'll be really nice.
I have some
starting
stuff
point
to share too. Yeah, we can work on this.
Yeah, I think yeah, I kind of want to use more octree mesh. So yeah, I want some starting point, and that seems like a nice place to start with.
And Joe, if you're happy with that pull request, then we can go ahead and bring that in.
Yeah, I'm good with it. Like I said, there just needs to be a couple small little changes to the SimPEG, main SimPEG repository to go along with it.
Okay, great. Lindsay, I made some comments about the 3D Still source.
Okay.
I think it's pretty minor, but I think I just got a couple questions. If you can answer that, I'm good to go.
Okay.
Can you like approve that directive IRLS?
Pretty sure I did, man.
I just pushed one more thing, and then I think I need one more.
Oh, really?
Approve. So if you can approve and just merge, that'll be great.
Right away, sir.
Perfect.
I didn't know I had to approve every time. Oh yeah.
I think yeah, you just need to go file, change it, and then you probably need to review, I guess.
There we go. I reviewed, ready to merge.
Perfect.
Has been dragging along. Good to go, man.
Okay, I'll merge that.
Okay. All right.
Cool. Sounds good.
Get going. Have a good day, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
See ya.
We will see you next week.
Thank you.